welcome back. President Biden letting loose on Russian President Vladimir Putin last night. At a fundraiser in California, Biden called Putin a, quote, crazy S.O.B, end quote, telling us all how he really feels as the U.S. government prepares a new package of sanctions against the Russians after Alexei Navalny was killed in the Arctic prison. Russia claims Navalny mysteriously died there after taking a walk last week. The UK announced new sanctions overnight as well. CNN's Claire Sebastian joins us from London. Claire, the Kremlin just responded to those comments from Biden. What are we learning?
Yeah, pretty strong words, Casey, from Dmitry Peskov. He said that these comments from Biden were shameful. He called them a huge disgrace for the United States. I want to read you a portion of what he said. He said, clearly, Mr. Biden is demonstrating behavior in the style of a Hollywood cowboy to cater to domestic political interests. And he then holds President Putin up as someone who never makes offensive remarks. So, look, it's relatively common in Russia for officials below Putin to sort of hurl insults at the U.S. It plays very well, I should say, in the Russian propaganda, where the sort of confrontational foreign policy with the U.S. is a way of deflecting the blame of Putin for any of the ills inside the country. So that, I think, is what we're seeing here. President Putin, though, himself usually tends, as Mr. Peskov was alluding to stay aloft of these kinds of public spats. Casey?
Claire, yes, well, gotta love that we are sitting here talking about the U.S. president calling, he swears a lot, I will just say that. Claire Sebastian, thank you very much for that reporting. All right, a Russian-American ballerina who lives in Los Angeles has been arrested in Russia and charged on suspicion of treason after allegedly donating $51.80 to a Ukrainian charity in the United States. Ksenia Karolina became a U.S. citizen in 2021 and went to Russia on January 2nd to visit her 90-year-old grandmother, her family says. The U.S. learned of Karolina's arrest on February 8th. In Russia, treason charges punishable by up to 20 years in prison. Let's bring in CNN's Max Foster to talk more about this. Max, good morning to you. There is a travel warning that the U.S. has put out that basically tells Americans don't go to Russia because something like this may happen. Why do you think we're seeing this happen more frequently? I mean, this case in particular, I mean, we have pictures of her, dancing on the Brooklyn Bridge. Right. I mean, it's a very sort of poignant example of this. And of course, it comes after Evan Gershkovich has been detained. He was detained in the same city that she was detained in. What's Putin doing here?
Well, a very powerful interview on CNN yesterday with her boyfriend, wasn't it, where he described how he gave her the ticket as because she was homesick and she wanted to go back to Russia. And this is what's ended up happening. I mean, you talk about Gershkovich, there are many other cases, whatever you think about these charges and whether they're completely out of proportion for what she did, what we are seeing is, American citizens being used as pawns in negotiation in order to get something out of America. So, if you look at the theme of these events, people getting charged for things that we in the West think is, they're being overcharged, if I can call it that, and then they're being used, in a diplomatic game. So has she been caught up with that? You're right to point out that there are travel warnings. So she would have been aware of the risk, and she knows, Russia well, of course, as well. But at the same time, it's seen as very unfair that she could be charged with treason for donating just $50 to a charity, an American charity, arguably. The charity was registered in the U.S.
Right. And again, $50.80 or $51 approximately. Max, let's talk for a second about this back and forth between the American president Biden and Vladimir Putin. Biden letting loose. We often get this from him in private moments, right? This wasn't on camera. It was at a private fundraiser in California. There have also been instances where it's sort of gotten out that the president has used this kind of language. It's more often in the context of American politics than directed necessarily toward foreign leaders, but I think we've got a sense of how, he really feels, in the Kremlin, of course, calling it boorish language and saying that he is in the style of a Hollywood cowboy. When you sort of think about the optics of the back and forth here, what do you see in sort of the spikiness between these two men?
Well, the optics, I mean, they are opaque. I mean, it's become so chaotic. You know, you've got the Kremlin criticizing the White House. The other day, we saw President Putin backing Biden in the American presidential race. You've got a situation where Donald Trump is comparing himself to Navalny, but at the same time, not criticizing President Putin for what happened to Navalny. One of the few, you know, global figures that hasn't done that. I mean, it's our job, isn't it, to try to navigate through all of this language, but it's very hard to make sense of any of it. I mean, does it give President Biden a bit of an edge with American voters? You tell me. I mean, it does show him to be authentic, I guess, a bit of character coming out when people are concerned about, you know, the resilience he has going into the next election.
People very, very concerned indeed. I mean, Vladimir Putin is not popular among Americans broadly, so I don't think that poses itself as an issue. Obviously, we have kind of a slice of the Republican primary electorate that's in a very different spot, hence the Ukraine aid being held up. Max Foster for us in London. Max, thank you, as always. I really appreciate it.